The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today.
So today we have a question from Heather, who writes to us from Lexington, Virginia. And Heather writes, King Charles III is visiting Washington in celebration of the country's 250th anniversary. What is the real purpose of the king's visit? Since he has no real power, is there a diplomatic reason or agenda that the king can promote? Or do you think this is just for show? Given the tension between the U.S. and the UK over Iran, should the UK government have tried harder to get the king to cancel? Regarding Iran, Iran has threatened to expand its blockade to the Sea of Oman and the Red Sea unless the U.S. lifts its naval blockade. Oil prices surged amid fears of prolonged conflict and potential infrastructure attacks. The UAE has announced it will be leaving OPEC. Does this decision have anything to do with the Iranian war? What might the global energy consequences be if OPEC were to dissolve? Excellent questions, Heather. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Mark, Scott, your thoughts?
Well, where do you want to start?
Let's start with the king. Let's start with the king, and then we'll get into the deeper discussion. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that the king did a really nice job of dressing down Trump
Absolutely.
and MAGA and the Republicans in Congress, and that they were too stupid to understand that that was what was going on. So they got up and applauded him anyway.
Vance did not applaud, however, from what I understand.
Who didn't?
Vance. I don't believe that Vance got up and applauded. But the king does have soft power, Heather, to answer your question. And to my knowledge, Trump has nothing but adulation for the royal family. He's all about the royal family, in particular her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, with a big photo album. Oh, here's the Queen this and the Queen that, and King Charles this and Charles that, and so on and so forth. Trump doesn't particularly care for Harry or Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, I believe. But he does have fondness, Trump does, for the remainder of the royal family, and also for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, of Wales. I guess it would be the Prince, I'm so sorry, Prince William and Princess Catherine of Wales. King Charles would have some influence over Trump. Now that I've gotten the royal family's titles all messed up, he would have influence over Trump that probably no one else does. That's probably not going to do anything to make Trump like Keir Starmer anymore than Trump already does. I don't know if it will do anything to repair any diplomatic relationship. Certainly over the Falkland Islands. And as you said, Scott, what the king had to say went over Trump's head. I don't know how many, I'm sure Vance understood it, because he's not a dope. Which is probably one reason why he didn't clap, which was unfortunate, because Vance is not a good actor. He's not good enough to stand up or intelligent enough to stand up and clap and make it look like he is on the same page with everybody else. So he wasn't raised, well enough, like the royal family were. They will stand up and applaud and be gracious even when they don't feel like being gracious, and you can't tell the difference probably unless you know them personally, which I certainly do not. But Vance isn't either well bred enough or intelligent enough to figure that out. Um, I had
Well,
thought that I had thought that they should cancel the king and queen, but they obviously understand protocol and diplomacy and the relationships um globally and the importance far more than I do. I mean, they grew up in that environment. My concern was lax security. So I hope they brought their own security. Do you know anything
yeah,
about that?
no, I don't. But look, here's the cool part is that Charles got up and made a speech to Congress, and in that speech, he mentioned a couple of things that I thought were very pointed and smart, and not exactly on the same page as Trump and the Republicans in Congress. One of those had to do with the environment. He said, so as we look forward to the next 250 years, we must also reflect on our shared responsibility to safeguard nature, our most precious and irreplaceable asset. Millennia, millennia before our nations existed, before any border drawn, the mountains of Scotland and Appalachia were one, a single continuous range forged in the ancient collision of continents. The natural wonders of the United States of America are indeed a unique asset, and generations of Americans have risen to this calling. Indigenous, political, and civic leaders, people in rural communities and cities alike, have all helped to protect and nurture what President Theodore Roosevelt called the glorious heritage of this land's extraordinary natural splendor, on which so much of its prosperity has always depended. Yet, even as we celebrate the beauty that surrounds us, our generation must decide how to address the collapse of critical natural systems which threaten far more than the harmony and essential diversity of nature. We ignore it at our peril. The fact that these are natural systems, in other words, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security. That, my friends, is the King of England telling Trump, you should have stayed in the Paris Accords. You shouldn't have left it. We have responsibilities to our grandchildren, children. We have responsibility towards nature, to people around the world who are living in developing countries where they're just getting going where we've been for 100 years now. And that was a fantastic moment for the king. I'm sorry I couldn't do it in the accent. It sounds too much like fake Monty Python when I do that. And the other thing that he said, and I thought this was great, was he talked about the Magna Carta. And he said how many times the Magna Carta is cited in Supreme Court cases as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. And the idiot Republicans in Congress who have given up their ability or their willingness to check or balance the executive branch got up and applauded because they had no idea, I think, what he was talking about. So I thought he made a tremendous speech. He said a lot, sort of um, offhandedly or in the subtext of what he was saying that you would have to really think about in order to understand. And it went right over the heads of the people in the room, including the president of the United States in Congress. I thought he did a fantastic job. I don't know about anything about the security that he brought with him. I'm sure he has his own security people. And I guess I concur with you, Brooke. I was a little surprised that they went forward with it, but it's really hard to organize these things, I suppose, and you don't want to cancel them if you don't absolutely have to.
And they stayed away from the Hilton Ballroom.
That's right.
So there's that. I agree with Scott. I think it was a great speech. I think that he really showed a huge difference between I'm not going to say the attitude, but the virtue of two people. I mean, the King of England, let's face it, they're privileged beyond how we could even comprehend. But he spoke as a person of the world, concerned about the world when he was talking about the environment. I think one of his best, and I totally agree with you that half the room couldn't follow along, just simply could not follow along. When he said, Mr. President, you said that if it wasn't for the United States, we'd all be speaking German today. And he goes, but I remind you, if it wasn't for us, you'd all be speaking French.
Mhm.
Great. I mean, subtle, funny, but to the point.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you're not as important as you make it out to be. As you want people to believe that you are. And I think that's a huge benefit to the King of England. Yes, I was one of the first ones to say that Keir Starmer's government should have said, Your Majesty, you shouldn't do this. Please don't do this. But now I'm totally on the other side of it. I think it was he showed what a statesman truly is. Something that we don't have.
Yeah,
We
at the
don't have
moment,
any of
for
this.
sure. Yeah.
And you're right. He has no power. True power. He's the head of state, yes, but it's more ceremonial than it is anything else. But the one thing that he's got, like Trump and Keir Starmer, Trump's been beating on Keir Starmer the whole time. It would be really hard for him to beat on the King of England. I mean, I don't even think Trump could pull that off. Call him a nasty man or anything like that. I don't think he could do it. So in some ways, the king gets a little bit of cover because you really can't talk really bad about the King of England. But the fact that he showed that he can be diplomatic. This is not his first clam bake. He's an educated man. He's an extremely educated man. He has lived in this environment. Even though it's, again, ceremonial. He's lived in this environment his entire life. And has done so with something that Trump doesn't have. He's done so with dignity. Yes, he had the problem with Princess Diana, yada, yada. But, okay. But the fact is that, here's the other thing you know about the King of England. He's not in the Epstein files.
Yeah.
So, I think he did a great job. And as I say, I was one of the first people to say, geez, please, Starmer, don't let him come. Don't let him come. But I think he did a great speech, and I think he really, if you're a world leader watching that, the King of England figurehead, basically making Trump look like a complete ass without calling him a complete ass. It's like my dad used to say, great Irish proverb, the ability to tell somebody to go to hell in a way that makes them look forward to the trip. And that's what the King of England did.
Yeah, and I must say about Her Majesty Queen Camilla, who, because King Charles couldn't see the survivors of Epstein, he had to turn them down, which, I mean, he can't see them because Trump hasn't seen them. So from a diplomatic protocol, I can understand that he can't see them. And when Queen Camilla was asked, she said yes, if First Lady Melania will go with her to see them together. I don't know what Melania had to say about it.
I think I could probably give you that. Hell no.
Yeah.
Melania was too busy getting her ass squeezed by her husband,
yes,
who once again showed his lack of class and
I'm
grace.
sure. But that was a very good response.
Yep.
That leaves it entirely up to the classless Melania, and that shows exactly who is the diplomat and the lady, and who is the down in the gutter individual.
Yeah. Look, they did a very good job of presenting with some class, great class, I suppose, some really pointed criticism of Trump for threatening to leave NATO, for the environment, as I said before, for the lack of checks and balances because of the compliant Congress when Trump is in office. Fantastic, So let's move on to Iran,
Yeah.
because I think that there's going to be some meat on the bone here. Um, Iran has evidently provided yet another plan, which I'm sure Trump won't go for, which calls for basically getting back to where we were the day, like February 27th or whatever it was, before the bombing started. And apparently Reuters reports that Trump has been asking U.S. intelligence agencies to look into what would happen if Trump simply declared victory and pulled everybody out, pulled all the troops out. And my guess is that if he did that, he would declare victory, but everybody knows it's a loss, and that he would basically leave Iran with the total control of the Strait of Hormuz, and as Ambassador John Bolton said yesterday, a third weapon in their war against us. The first one being terrorism, the second one being the threat of nuclear proliferation, and the third one now being basically an economic stranglehold on the global economy anytime they want to do it. And one of the things that Iran has said that he has to do is leave the Middle East forever and leave it to the people of the Middle East to run the Middle East.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've said this before. He took a minor regional power and made them a world power.
Yep.
And that's really the truth of the matter. And you can, try to sugarcoat it any way you want. As Scott said, he could declare victory and pull out. Okay. It doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot if you leave everything that supposedly you were going there to accomplish undone, and you've given them, as Scott says, a new weapon to use against you. I think the other thing, the other interesting part of the question was about the UAE leaving OPEC.
Yeah.
And does this have to do with the Iranian war? According to the UAE, no. It really is kind of like a reset for them. And I think it's important that we really realize people look at OPEC and they see it as, it's just these oil producing countries. But it is meant to stabilize oil prices. Some countries in OPEC can produce oil a lot cheaper than others, say like Venezuela. Venezuela oil is extremely expensive. Our shale oil is extremely expensive, even though we're not in OPEC. So this is kind of the thing that levels the playing field, so that those countries, Iran, Kuwait, those countries that can really get oil out of the ground cheaper, basically do not take advantage of the oil market. So in some ways, it stabilizes the price. It stabilizes the price of oil. If OPEC was to say dissolve, there is a long-term possibility that oil prices could come down, long term. But in the short term, you would have total instability of the oil market. And some of these countries that rely on oil, that are rentier states that Scott talks about, like Venezuela, would have no income, because nobody's going to want to buy their oil at $100 a barrel when Iran's selling it for $25 a barrel. I mean, it's just plain and simple. So in many ways, OPEC is really a stabilizing force, and it's also a political force. Take away OPEC, and that's going to impact Russia, because they're in OPEC plus, I guess is what it's called. They're kind of into it, and the Chinese. So the Chinese are, because they are so reliant on oil, and they basically have none. They have to get it from everywhere. They're going to have to get far more involved in the Middle East to be able to protect their own interests. And let's face it, because our oil is so expensive to get out of shale and fracking and all the other things that we do, and we don't even refine it, yeah, we're going to have to get involved. And that is going to become even a bigger hotbed than it is now. So the UAE, according to them, it's a reset for their own economy and for them looking forward. What this means to OPEC as a whole, that's yet to be seen.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, they're. Oh, do you want to go ahead, Scott?
well, I mean, I just wanted to, point out that I remember I think we're all old enough to remember the oil embargo of the 1970s, which was a reaction against the United States and the West, I guess, in general, coming to the aid of Israel during the Yom Kippur War, and an angry backlash by the oil-producing states, led by the Shah of Iran, who was one of the founders of OPEC. And the whole idea of OPEC was to put oil into the nations where the oil comes from, rather than what was called the Seven Sisters, multinational energy companies, right? That, we would know today as Shell, Chevron, Exxon Mobil, BP. Those companies ran the global oil market, and OPEC was a way of these countries, mainly Arab countries, but Venezuela was an originator of OPEC, because they didn't want these private enterprises or publicly traded companies to control the oil that they felt was on their land, and was a natural resource of their people or governments. And so that's the significance of OPEC breaking up. If it should break up, and UAE is certainly a big member of it, would be that the vacuum could be claimed by those oil companies. And how do we feel? I don't even know how we feel about moving from countries controlling the flow of oil to private companies controlling the flow of oil. And is that something that would have a positive effect or a negative effect? I can't honestly say I'm a big fan of OPEC or OPEC Plus, which includes, as you said, Russia and a few South American and African nations as well. But but it was predictable. OPEC was predictable. OPEC, for the most part, has kept everything on a level playing field, and there's no big gluts in the market. There's no huge shortages. Of course, once one OPEC country starts shooting at all the other OPEC countries, yeah, you could see why they would want to break that up, or at least eliminate Iran from OPEC rather than leaving themselves. But the long-term implications of this, I think, are that we see again this move from nation states to the kind of future that Orwell talked about in 1984, which is run by huge corporations with unbelievable amounts of money and power. And
Yep.
yeah, I don't know if I feel good about that.
No, and as long as Trump is in office, you know who's going to have his little fingers in the pockets of the companies, the oil companies, who
Sure.
may. Yeah. The other point I wanted to make about the UAE is that because there's a global push toward renewables, one of the UAE's rationales is they need to produce more, and Saudi Arabia, they need to produce it more now. And Saudi Arabia is the head of OPEC, and they determine how much each producer, each producing nation can produce to keep everything level and fair among the OPEC Plus nations. And while there is some cheating, um, there's not a lot of cheating. It's not an excess amount of cheating, and so that keeps nations from overproducing. And now the UAE can produce however much it wants. And Angola and left OPEC and Plus in 2019. There was another country that left before that, 2016. I can't remember the name of the country though. I'm sorry. I should be able to remember, but I can't. So this is the UAE is the third country who left. But Angola and the other country, I forget which one it was, were not large countries.
No.
So yeah, if OPEC falls apart, that, I mean, any change is destabilizing. And there's a book called The Green Paradox. It's by a gentleman who's German, Hans Werner Sinn, Sinn, Zinn, I guess, in German. And he points out that as we globally, humanity globally moves toward renewables and we become green, simultaneously the producing nations, people are going to want to produce more oil while they can, to make a profit while they can. So simultaneously, oil production and pollution from emissions will rise. At least that is his theory. So it's called the green paradox, and it's fascinating that this is his argument. And as demand drops over time, so right now, before all that happens, producers would wish to produce more, and make their profits while they can. So yeah,
makes sense.
Go ahead. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting argument. So, and speaking about what Trump is doing quietly, to my understanding, he is very quietly selling off public land from the United States to private hands. I don't know if that's been blocked or if that has been allowed to move forward. But these are, national, I don't know, I think this is national park land. It's public land.
Public land, yeah.
Yep. So, unless I am mistaken, that is a something that he has not talked about doing, but that is happening. I'm hoping I am mistaken about that. So when is the Connecticut National Guard supposed to be returning to Iran, from Iran, excuse me, and where are they?
I don't know. They just left. It was in
Iran.
Reported this morning. Well, I don't think they're going to Iran. They're going probably to a ship off the coast of Iran. But look, I mean, I think it's a signal that there is a possibility. One of the many possibilities, I think, of how this all ends up is that we're going to invade Iran. It's certainly it's not a 0% chance that we're going to, do massive airstrikes, decimate their military capabilities further, and put troops in, and try to destabilize their government to the point where, maybe the people do step up and overthrow their own government and murder the Republican Guard, who's basically running the country right now because the spiritual leader seems to be incapacitated. And that the fact that our kids here in Connecticut got shipped over there is a sign that there's going to be an escalation. So I mean, again, I don't know how to feel about it. I think once you start doing these things, you run out of good options quickly, and all that's left are bad options. And I don't see any value at all in allowing this regime to stay in power. So that's something, you're never going to stop them from wanting to be a nuclear power now that they've been invaded, or they're going to be invaded, or that they're being assaulted by other countries who have nuclear weapons and aren't afraid necessarily to use them. Who's not going to want to join that club? It's
Yeah.
more human nature than anything else, than any kind of like political calculations or theories or anything like that. If you have nuclear power, you don't get bullied. If you don't have nuclear power, you are subject to being bullied. So get nuclear power. But of course, the reason that we don't want them to have nuclear weapons is because Saudi Arabia would no doubt follow suit, and then other countries would want to join in, and they have the resources to do this. And so now, in the most unstable region in the entire world, we've got a whole bunch of countries involved in nuclear proliferation. That is a nightmare for the country, for the world. That is a nightmare. So doing something about that, not just leaving, seems to be an imperative. It has to happen. We cannot allow the Republican Guard to rule Iran. As horrific as a war is, and costly as this war will likely be, what choice do we have? I don't think we're talking our way through this at this point. And it makes me sad to say that, and it makes me sick to think that this idiot leader has gotten us here to this point. And I mean, every bone in my body said, do not bring this guy back. This is a disaster. And the country brought him back, and it's a disaster. And it's going to be worse this time than it was last time. And
certainly.
Here we
It's
are.
going to
And
get
here we are.
worse.
And it was pretty horrible last time. I never thought I'd have to wear a mask and watch people, choking to death in their own phlegm in hospitals around America, and not be able to see their loved ones because because the virus was so contagious, and all the horrors of 2020, and 2021. But going back to 2020, the insurrection, January 6th, and the whole, country falling apart over George Floyd's murder, and Bill Barr's secret police grabbing people off the streets. I mean, we saw things in 2020 that I never would have dreamed we would see in this country. And we lived through that, and some reason or another decided, you know what, we should bring that back. And it's even worse this time. I mean, it hasn't gotten to that point yet, but it will. There's little doubt about it. And they're going to, and now we're basically forced into a war that nobody here other than Trump apparently wanted to fight. And he refuses to send anybody but his own kin, or best friend, or whoever Steve Witkoff is to him, over there to negotiate our way through this. And frankly, I don't see a negotiation working at this point anyway.
Probably not. Okay.
So if you had to make a guess, then
I said we'd be at
Scott?
war this time next week.
Really?
Yeah. Bomb, saturation bombs dropping, uh, troops on the ground, you know. Nothing good, absolutely nothing good. But he's backed himself into a corner that he can't get out of. And you know, unless he chooses the route that we said before, where he simply declares victory, his base would certainly believe it, and that's all he seems to care about. And we walk away, and Iran has nuclear ambitions that they can fulfill because nobody's going to step back in there and stop them. There's no negotiation at this point. And the regime stays in place. You know, Trump says, "Oh, that's a different regime. I killed the last regime. This is a new regime. This is a new regime, same as the old regime." So I don't know. What have you accomplished exactly, sir?
Yeah.
Basically, he reopened the strait, which had been open until they closed it when he bombed them.
Yep.
What do you think, Mark? Do you think he'll walk and say, "Oh, we won," or do you think he'll,
Prediction,
since
Mark.
he's moving troops from like the National Guard?
Prediction time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the thing that concerns me is Scott telling us at the beginning that the Connecticut National Guard was sent.
Yeah, that bothers me tremendously.
You know what? That's never a really good sign. I mean, that truly does concern me quite a bit. I think that the calling back of Kushner and Witkoff, and it was presented that Trump was the one calling it back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that the Iranians weren't going to show up, and you know, it's just an attempt to save face. So you're probably not going to hear that out of our administration. But if you listen to everything the Iranians are saying, and if you listen a little bit to the Pakistanis, I think that's exactly, you know, where it's sat. Because look how embarrassing that would be. The American delegation shows up, and the other delegation basically says, you know, "I'm thumbing my nose at you." Right now, I think the people to really keep an eye on when it comes to this, and will probably be the determinant when it comes to how Trump is going to react in this instance. Keep an eye on the Chinese. Keep a very, very close eye on the Chinese, because they really do have a vested interest in this. I think they're pulling a lot more strings behind the scenes than you know people will admit, especially our people. Just keep an eye on the actions that they take. And I think that my prediction would be is if the Chinese basically send a signal that enough is enough, then I think Trump chickens out. I think he declares victory and goes and tries to tell everybody he won a war. And, you know, of course he wouldn't have. I think if they allow this to continue and don't send that signal, I think it can escalate. As Scott has mentioned, it can escalate. It's going to be determined on how the Chinese react to this.
What about the 60-day limit in that Congress is supposed to weigh in and give a permission or not? I don't think
you're
Trump's
not going
to
get that out of this Congress.
Yeah, I mean,
so they're just going to
Congress
say nothing.
They're sitting in a corner drooling. There's nothing going on. They're facing the wall. They're drooling. They have no say of anything. They are terrified of the man for whatever reason, and they're just going to go along with it.
And the fact is, they could have a say. They could have. They have the legal authority to have a say. It is not because Trump is so powerful that they don't. That you know that isn't it. The fact is they don't want to. They've relegated their authority, and once you do that, it's awful hard to get it back. And my biggest concern is that means that the executive branch, with people like Hegseth and Kid Rock, and you know that's who's running this show now, boys and girls. I mean, that's who's running the show. You can't tell me. I don't care if you're the most powerful military in the world. You know, if you're being run by clowns, you're still a circus.
Yes.
That's all there is to it. So, you know, it just is not. I don't think any of the decisions that come from Trump or come from this administration are going to have anything to do with the actual situation in Iran, I think it's going to have to. I truly do believe that how the Chinese, how they react, will determine how Trump's going to react. Because if he can't handle the damn Chinese, or he can't handle the damn Iranians, he sure shit can't handle the Chinese. Which is my other thing about Canada. If he can't handle Iran, he can't handle Canada.
No, I know.
Come on. No, you can't do it. So this is where we sit.
I mean, he may think he can handle Canada.
Well, he can think whatever he likes. He thinks he's got he thinks he's, a stable genius.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I mean, come on. He thinks a lot of stuff. That does not make it credible. Matter of fact, if he thinks it, probably isn't. It's opposite. What is it? Opposite day, But yeah.
Yes.
I truly do. Keep an eye on the Chinese. Another one is keep an eye on India. Keep a pretty. Those two countries, who are not historically bests of friends, but we have seen that there has been some warming of relationships. We saw that Modi and Xi Jinping and Putin were together. Arm locked. Okay, great. Because that could be a real dangerous area. If tensions rose up high between India and China, that could be a problem. So we keep an eye on the Chinese, and maybe to a little bit lesser extent, keep an eye on India. But I think you're going to find that whatever India is signaling is probably going to come from the Chinese, because the Chinese have a better relationship with Pakistan than do the Indians. So that would be my take onto it. Scott could be exactly right. And like I say, when he said that he had heard that they sent in the Connecticut National Guard, that's never good.
No.
That's never good. That's never a good thing. So, all right. And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Sciences, the JICS. This open access journal, double peer-reviewed, provides a platform for emerging scholars to publish their work and engage in meaningful dialogue across disciplines. The JICS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis and is published through the NovaWorks Scholarly Repository at Nova Southeastern University. You'll find a link to the journal in our episode description.